The most dangerous thing a powerful man can do is laugh at someone he cannot yet see. There is a particular silence that precedes ruin. Not the silence of empty rooms or idle afternoons, but the silence of a predator pausing, certain of its kill, unaware that the ground beneath its paws has already begun to give way. Marcus Vane, 61 years old, founder and sovereign of the Vane Capital Empire, a man whose net worth had been printed on 3 consecutive magazine covers in the same fiscal year, understands this kind of silence. He has weaponized it. He has built boardrooms designed around it. Walls of glass, floors of Italian marble, chairs positioned so that light falls directly onto the face of whoever sits across from him, leaving his own in comfortable shadow. He manufactures certainty the way other men manufacture excuses. But on this particular Tuesday morning in October, inside the Grand Palais Hotel and Residences of Geneva, Marcus Vane laughs. He does not mean to. He is not the kind of man who laughs spontaneously, who lets the body override the strategy. But he laughs because he sees her shoes. Her name is Nadia Osei. She is 29 years old, the daughter of a Ghanaian textile merchant and a Lebanese translator, raised between Accra and Beirut, educated on scholarships and stubbornness, fluent in 6 languages, and currently, as of this very morning, the most junior financial analyst in the entire corporate history of Vane Capital's Geneva satellite office. She stands in the lobby of the Grand Palais, wearing a charcoal blazer that fits her perfectly, a white blouse, pressed with the precision of someone who irons at midnight, and shoes, black leather Oxfords from the House of Aurelian, that are visibly, undeniably, magnificently worn. The left heel is scraped down to its brass underlayer. The right toe bears a crack in the leather that runs like a fault line across expensive real estate. She has polished them anyway. She polishes them every morning, the way her father used to polish his. You don't wear what you have, Nadia. You wear who you are. But polish cannot resurrect what time has claimed. Marcus sees the shoes first. Then the woman. The laugh is involuntary. 2 short exhales through his nose. The kind a man permits himself when he believes no one important is watching. His assistant, Julian Holt, stands half a step behind him, tablet in hand, and catches the sound and its direction, and smiles the way subordinates smile. Not because something is funny, but because the man with the checkbook is amused. Nadia hears it. She hears everything. She has always heard everything. It is, in fact, the skill that is about to save her life. She does not look at them. Not yet. She crosses the lobby toward the conference registration desk with the particular posture of someone who has learned that stillness under pressure is its own form of armor. The Grand Palais lobby smells of white roses and heated stone and the faint mineral ghost of the lake just beyond its windows. Rain has begun outside, a fine, thin Geneva rain that mists rather than falls, turning the October light silver and cold. The chandeliers overhead cast everything in amber. The marble beneath her worn shoes does not distinguish between the footfall of the rich and the footfall of the careful. She gives her name. She collects her badge. She turns. Marcus Vane has moved to the registration table himself now, bypassing the line with the ease of a man who has never waited for anything, and Julian materializes at the desk before him, handling the administrative labor while Marcus scans the room with the particular surveillance of the perpetually acquisitive. His eyes land on Nadia's badge. He reads it, something in his expression, the almost imperceptible softening around the eyes that precedes condescension, tells her everything she needs to know about what he thinks of her. Osei, he says, not as a greeting, as an identification. You're the new analyst. Yes. She extends her hand. Nadia Osei. It's a pleasure to meet you, Mr. Vane. He shakes it. Barely. The handshake of a man confirming what he already suspects, that this interaction requires nothing from him. The pleasure is Geneva's, he says, which is not a compliment, and turns away before she can respond. She watches him go. She watches the particular way he moves through a room. The centripetal gravity of enormous wealth. How people subtly orient toward him, even when they're pretending not to, how the space around him stays slightly wider than the space around anyone else, as if even proximity to such a man requires an invitation. She watches Julian Holt follow half a step behind, and she watches the stack of documents tucked under Julian's left arm, and she reads. In the quarter second she has, the header visible on the uppermost page, Memorandum of Understanding, Kintawa Heritage Trust. She knows that name. She knows exactly what it is, and what it is not, and what its presence in Julian Holt's arms at a closed-door private equity conference in Geneva almost certainly means. Her breath catches. Just once, just barely. She smooths it out like a crease from a shirt and walks to the conference room. The morning session is unremarkable. Panels of men in dark suits discussing yield curves and distressed assets with the enthusiasm of people who have loved only money for so long they've begun to speak in its cadences. Nadia sits in the second row, her notebook open, her pen moving. She is not taking notes about yield curves. She is writing a name over and over in the margin of her page, Kintawa. Her grandmother used to tell her a story about a shepherd, her grandfather, Kwam, who had built his entire livelihood on a single flock in the hills outside Kumasi. The flock was everything. It was the family's food and its income and its future. And there was a man, a land buyer from the south, smooth-voiced and suited, who came to the village with papers telling the farmers that a regional agricultural ordinance had reclassified their grazing land as commercial use territory, and that they would need to sell or be taxed into foreclosure. The farmers believed him, all of them but Kwame, because Kwame had once, years earlier, been employed by a British colonial surveyor, and he had learned, in the awkward, incidental way that laborers learn things their employers don't intend to teach, that the ordinance in question applied only to land tracts exceeding 40 hectares without recorded indigenous heritage designation. Kwame's land was 37 hectares, and it had a designation. And the buyer knew this and was counting on the shepherd not knowing it. Kwame knew it. The buyer lost. The flock survived. Nadia's grandmother had told her this story not as a lesson in law, but as a lesson in attention. The wolf wears the suit, she used to say, in Twi, or Bosama otem panimfor hoa ohen tama. The spirit that sits among elders wears cloth. The danger that once your land wears the face of paperwork. Nadia is thinking of her grandmother now, sitting in the second row of a conference room in Geneva, watching Marcus Vane take the stage for the afternoon's keynote address. He speaks for 35 minutes about emerging market opportunity in sub-Saharan Africa, infrastructure deficits, untapped natural resource corridors, the unprecedented yield potential of what he calls heritage-adjacent real estate. He is eloquent. He is compelling. He is in the way of very powerful liars, almost completely right about everything he says until he isn't. The difference between the truth he is telling and the truth he is hiding is so small that only someone who has been inside that specific gap would notice it. Nadia notices it. During the cocktail reception that follows, she does not drink. She stands near the window where the lake below has turned pewter in the evening light, and she watches Julian Holt work the room, and she thinks about what to do. She thinks about her student loans, $68,000, transferred into Swiss francs for the purposes of her European posting. She thinks about the 2-year contract she signed 2 weeks ago, the one with the morality clause that allows Vane Capital to terminate her employment for conduct deemed contrary to the professional interests and reputation of the firm. She thinks about the apartment she has not yet fully furnished because she did not want to spend money on things she might have to sell. She thinks about her mother, who cleaned offices in Beirut for 11 years to contribute to the scholarship fund. She thinks about her father, polishing shoes. She picks up a glass of sparkling water from a passing tray. She walks across the room. She taps Julian Holt on the shoulder. He turns. Up close, he is younger than she thought, early 30s perhaps, with the polished confidence of someone who has learned to dress expensively and smile strategically. He looks at her badge, then at her face, then She sees it happen, the micro-assessment, the recalibration downward, at her shoes. "Osi," he says. "Nadia, you're settling in?" "Getting there," she says. "Congratulations on the Kintawa deal." The valuation model must have been complex. A pause. Brief, but real. "We don't typically discuss active transactions at public events," he says pleasantly. The pleasantness is a lid on something else. "Of course," she says. "I only mention it because I worked on a related matter during my postgrad fellowship at the University of Ghana Law School. The Kintawa Heritage Trust was established under the 1992 Constitution's Article 267, which places stool lands under the Lands Commission, which means any transfer of interest exceeding leasehold duration would require ratification by the Lands Commission and the Traditional Council, not just the Trust's administrative board." She pauses. She takes a sip of her water. "I assume you've accounted for that." "I just mention it because the MOU you were carrying this morning looked like it was structured as a direct acquisition." Julian Holt does not move for a moment. He is a still man when he is calculating. Then he smiles, a different smile than before, slower and more precise. "You read a document header from 20 feet away. I was closer to 12. And you know Ghanaian constitutional land law. My grandmother's family had a stool land case in 2003, she says. I was 11. I read the entire file. I have a very good memory." He excuses himself. He is gone for 4 minutes. She counts. He returns with Marcus Vane at his side, and Marcus Vane is not laughing now. "My assistant tells me you have an academic interest in the Kintawa project," Marcus says. His voice is lower in private than it was on stage, quieter and more deliberate, the voice of a man accustomed to saying things once. "Walk with me." They move to a corner of the room, where the noise of the reception fades to a murmur. Marcus faces the window. Geneva glitters below them, indifferent and cold and radiant. He puts his hands in his pockets. He does not look at her. "The Kintawa Heritage Trust," he says, "is a privately administered custodial body overseeing approximately 12,000 hectares in the Brong-Ahafo region. We have a signed memorandum of understanding with the Trust's administrative board for an acquisition that will allow us to develop a mineral extraction corridor in partnership with 3 European infrastructure funds. The deal closes in 30 days. "The deal cannot close in 30 days, Nadia says. Her voice is steady. Her hands inside her blazer pockets are not legally. Not under Article 267. The Trust's administrative board has authority over operational decisions, but not over disposition of the underlying stool land. For that, you need Lands Commission approval, which has a statutory minimum review period of 60 working days, and you need a Traditional Council resolution, which, under the Chieftaincy Act of 2008, requires a formal durbar and a documented consensus from the paramount chief, and not fewer than 2/3 of the divisional chiefs within the traditional area." She pauses. "Your MOU is with the administrative board. It's not worth the paper it was printed on if the Traditional Council hasn't been consulted." Marcus turns from the window. He looks at her directly for the first time. Not the glancing assessment of the lobby, but a full, fixed look, the look of a man taking something seriously. It is not a comfortable look to receive. It has the quality of examination. "The administrative board has represented that they have the requisite authority," he says. "The administrative board is mistaken. Or lying." She says it quietly. In 2019, a Chinese infrastructure company attempted a similar acquisition on stool land in the western region. The MOU was signed by an administrative custodian. The Lands Commission voided it 18 months later after the Traditional Council objected. The company lost $340 million in pre-development expenditure. The case is Amankwa v. Sinobuild Holdings, unreported, High Court Accra, 2021. Marcus is quiet for a very long time. Outside, the Geneva rain has thickened. It presses against the glass now in slow, insistent sheets. In the corner of the room, Julian Holt stands very still, watching them, and his face carries the particular expression of a man revising his estimate of a situation. Marcus reaches into his jacket pocket and removes a card. It is bone white and heavyweight, with text embossed in a deep charcoal ink. He holds it out to her. "Come to the office Monday," he says. Not as a junior analyst, as a consultant on the Kintawa transaction. She takes the card. She does not look at it. She keeps her eyes on his. "I would need to understand the full transaction structure before I could confirm," she says. He almost smiles. "Almost Monday," he says, and walks away. She stands at the window for a moment after he has gone. The lake below is dark now, the lights of the far shore strung like unsteady stars. She looks down at the card in his hand. She turns it over. On the back, handwritten in the compressed, deliberate script of someone who does not waste motion even in ink. Monday, 8 a.m. Don't be late. She puts the card in her pocket. She finishes her water. She walks to the elevator, and, when the doors close and she is alone in the mirrored box rising toward her floor, she lets out a breath she has been holding for approximately 45 minutes. Her hands are trembling. Just slightly. She watches them in the mirror, these hands that have read their way through 6 languages and 2 university libraries, and a grandmother's briefcase full of land documents from 2003. And she thinks the shepherd always knows more than the wolf expects. The week between the reception and Monday morning is the longest of her life. She spends it in the Vane Capital's satellite office library. A room lined with grey legal files and financial reports that smell of coolant and old paper, reading everything she can find on the Kintawa transaction. She finds the original feasibility study. 2021, commissioned by a London consultancy, projecting mineral extraction yields from a manganese corridor that crosses approximately 4,000 hectares of the trust land. She finds the environmental impact pre-assessment. 2022, conducted by a subsidiary firm, which she discovers. On page 47 of 63, is itself majority owned by one of the 3 European infrastructure funds participating in the acquisition, a firm assessing an impact for a project in which it holds financial interest. She finds something else, buried in the appendix of an administrative trust document dated 2018, a single paragraph noting that the Kintawa Heritage Trust land includes within its boundaries a site registered under Ghana's Cultural Heritage Protection Act of 2016. The Asante Dwa Ceremonial Ground, a sacred site used for royal installation ceremonies, Cultural Heritage Protection Act. Section 22 prohibits any commercial development within 500 meters of a registered sacred site without a Cultural Heritage Commission permit issued only after a 7-year impact assessment period. The manganese corridor crosses the sacred site boundary. She does not sleep much that week. She reads instead. She eats breakfast at her desk. A ritual she has maintained since her fellowship years. The conviction that clarity comes with the morning, and you should meet it fed. She types up her findings in a document she titles simply Notes KT, and which is, by the time she is done, 31 pages long, and cites 17 distinct statutory provisions across 4 separate bodies of Ghanaian law. She also, that week, receives 2 phone calls. The first is from Julian Holt on Wednesday evening, his voice cordial and measured. He tells her that Marcus has great confidence in her insight from the reception. He tells her that the consulting arrangement will be structured as a special advisory role, reporting directly to the transaction team. He tells her the compensation is competitive. He tells her, in the particular way, that people tell you things they want you to understand without being able to later claim they said them directly. That Marcus is a man who rewards alignment and does not easily forgive the opposite. "I understand," she says. "Excellent," Julian says. The word drops into the phone like a stone into water. The second call comes Thursday morning. An unknown number, Swiss area code. A voice she doesn't recognize, older, a man, speaking in accented English that she can place within 2 words. Akan substrate, Twi mother tongue, formal British education overlay. He identifies himself as Emmanuel Asante Mensah, legal counsel to the Kintawa Traditional Council. I was given your name by a mutual contact, he says. Someone at the reception in Geneva. I understand you may be in a position to assist the council in understanding the legal structure of the acquisition proposed by Vane Capital. She is quiet for a moment. Who gave you my name? A pause. Does it matter? She thinks of Julian Holt's stone-dropping word. Excellent. She thinks of a wolf who wears cloth. She thinks of her grandmother, who sent her the land file from 2003 in a padded envelope when she started law school, along with a note written in Twi. Nea ohunua sementina onkai no. The one who witnessed is not the one who forgets. No, she says. It doesn't matter. Tell me what you know. They speak for 90 minutes. Emanuela Santemensa has been fighting the Kintawa transaction for 14 months, but from the outside. Issuing formal objections to the Lands Commission, attempting to contact the Trust's administrative board, writing letters that have received responses consisting of polite assurance and zero action. He does not know about the Asante WR site and the Cultural Heritage Protection Act provision. When she tells him, there is a silence on the line so complete she can hear the distance between Accra and Geneva. That is not a procedural obstacle, he says finally, slowly. That is a prohibition, yes, she says. It is, and Vane Capital knows. She thinks about the feasibility study. She thinks about the subsidiary firm that conducted the environmental assessment, the one owned by the Infrastructure Fund. She thinks about page 47 of 63 and what a 31-page document of notes she wrote at 2 a.m. says about what someone decided not to find. I believe they made choices, she says carefully, about what their due diligence was designed to discover. Another silence. Then, Miss Osei, what do you intend to do on Monday? She looks at her 31 pages of notes. She looks at her worn shoes, sitting beside her desk, gleaming from last night's polish. She thinks about a shepherd in the hills outside Kumasi, who knew something a suited man from the south had counted on him not knowing. I intend, she says, to do my job. Monday morning arrives like a verdict. The rain has stopped over the weekend and left the city polished, the lake bright and cold, the Alps visible on the horizon for the first time since she arrived, white and absolute against the blue. She takes the number 8 tram to the financial district. She wears the charcoal blazer. She wears the white blouse, freshly pressed at 5 a.m. She wears the shoes, the Aurelian Oxfords, worn and honest, polished like armor. In her bag, her 31-page document, printed on Vane Capital letterhead, she requested from the office supply room on Thursday, because she knows that the weight of paper matters in rooms like the one she is entering. The Vane Capital Geneva office occupies the top 3 floors of a building on the Rue du Rhône that is made almost entirely of glass, which she suspects is intended to feel transparent, and in practice achieves the opposite. Everything inside it is visible, and nothing inside it is readable. She signs in. She is escorted to the 32nd floor. The elevator opens directly into a reception area of dark wood and creamstone, where a woman, with the particular composed beauty of someone employed in environments where composed beauty is considered infrastructural, asks for her name and directs her toward a conference room. At the end of a corridor, the conference room is already occupied. Marcus Vane sits at the head of the table. Julian Holt sits to his left. Across from Julian sit 2 men she does not recognize, Europeans, 60-ish, the cultivated anonymity of serious money. And at the far end of the table, to her complete lack of surprise, sits a man she has never met in person, but whose voice she recognizes immediately. Emanuela Santemensa, who is looking at her with an expression that is simultaneously professional and deeply, quietly relieved. Marcus sees her notice. He reads the recognition on her face and on Emmanuel's. His own face does not change. He is a man who has sat across from surprises and taught himself to metabolize them in real time. He gestures to the chair beside Emmanuel. Sit down, Miss Osei. She sits. She places her document on the table in front of her. She puts her hands flat on the table. Her hands are not trembling today. Mr. Asante Mensah has joined us this morning to represent the traditional council's interests, Marcus says. Since we appear to have experienced some procedural misalignment. The phrase procedural misalignment carries the weight of a man describing a hurricane as adverse weather conditions. Julian Holt leans forward. Nadia, before we begin, I want to be clear about your role here. You were engaged as a consultant to support the Kintawa transaction. Not to complicate it, I was engaged to provide accurate legal analysis, she says, which is what I intend to do. The transaction has a signed MOU, Julian says. The administrative board has given full authorization. The deal closes in 27 days. Any additional procedural concerns can be addressed post-close through the appropriate regulatory. The deal cannot close, she says. Not loudly. Not with any particular emphasis, just flatly and completely, the way you say a thing that is simply true. Not legally. Not in 27 days or 270 days. Not without a traditional council resolution, Lands Commission approval, and a Cultural Heritage Commission permit that has a statutory minimum issuance period of 7 years. Julian opens his mouth. She continues, the Kintawa Heritage Trust land contains within its boundaries the Asante Dwa Ceremonial Ground, registered under the Cultural Heritage Protection Act of 2016, Section 7, Registration Number CHG 2016-0043, the proposed manganese extraction corridor, as designed in the 2021 feasibility study, crosses this registration boundary at coordinates approximately 5 degrees, 31 minutes, north by 2 degrees, 0 minutes west. I've included the GIS mapping data on page 18 of my analysis, cross-referenced against the corridor's projected access road design. Section 22 of the Cultural Heritage Protection Act prohibits commercial development within 500 meters of any registered site. The corridor does not pass near the site. It passes through it. The two European men exchange a glance. It is a quiet glance, the kind exchanged between people who have invested significant capital in something that has just been described as impossible. One of them, silver-haired, Swiss-German accent, speaks. The environmental impact assessment did not flag this. The environmental impact assessment was conducted by Meridian Environmental Partners, Nadia says, a firm that is majority owned by Rheinfeld Capital AG, which is one of the 3 infrastructure funds participating in this acquisition. I've included the corporate ownership structure on page 22. She slides a printed copy of her analysis toward the center of the table. No one touches it. An assessor with financial interest in the outcome of the assessment is not an independent assessor. The assessment would likely not survive a Lands Commission review. Marcus Vane has not spoken in 3 minutes. He is looking at his hands on the table. He is doing the thing she watched him do at the reception. Metabolizing. Processing. Arriving with the speed of a genuinely intelligent man at conclusions he does not want to reach. Julian Holt has no such equanimity. You're a junior analyst who has been with this firm for less than 3 weeks, he says. And now the pleasantness is entirely gone. The lid fully off. You have no standing to. The law doesn't care about my seniority, she says. The Cultural Heritage Protection Act applies to this land, whether I am a junior analyst or the Chief Justice. The registration number is real. The coordinates are real. The 7-year permit requirement is real, and Mr. Asante Mensah can confirm that the Traditional Council has not, at any point, been consulted about this acquisition, which is itself a violation of the Chieftaincy Act, Section 34, which prohibits alienation of stool land interest without traditional authority consent. She turns to Marcus. Mr. Vane, I understand you have significant capital committed to this transaction. I understand your infrastructure partners have committed more. I understand the commercial logic is compelling. Manganese prices are at a 15-year high, and this corridor is genuinely valuable. She pauses, but the transaction, as structured, will be void under Ghanaian law from the moment of attempted execution. The Lands Commission will reject it. The Cultural Heritage Commission will sanction it, and when that happens, When avoided acquisition in violation of cultural protection law becomes a headline, the reputational consequences will extend beyond this deal to your entire sub-Saharan portfolio. She picks up her document. She stands up. She places it in front of Marcus Vane and returns to her seat. On page 27, she says, I have outlined an alternative structure, a long-term revenue-sharing partnership with the traditional council under a framework permissible under Article 267 with Lands Commission approval. Using a corridor that avoids the cultural heritage boundary, it requires 18 months and good faith engagement, rather than 30 days and a forged shortcut. She looks at him. The yields are nearly identical over a 20-year horizon. The risk is not. The room is silent, the kind of silence that is not empty but full, packed with calculation and recalibration, and the quiet, grinding sound of expensive plans meeting their consequences. Emanuela Santamensa speaks for the first time since she sat down. The traditional council, he says, in a voice that carries the measured weight of someone who has been waiting 14 months to be in this room, is prepared to discuss a partnership structure of the kind Miss Ose has described. We have always been prepared to discuss it. We were never asked. Marcus picks up the document. He opens it to page 1. He begins to read. He reads with the focused attention of a man who has been given a map of a minefield he has been walking across in the dark. Julian Holt reaches for a copy. The two European men reach for copies. The room fills with the sound of turning pages, the specific, serious sound of people reading something that changes what they thought they knew. Marcus reads for 11 minutes. The others finish before him. He turns the last page. He closes the document. He looks at Nadia. The alternative structure on page 27, he says. You designed this yourself? Yes, when? This week. He looks at her for a long moment, the same full, fixed look from the reception, but different now. The examination has arrived at a different conclusion. He looks down at the document cover, plain, white, notes, KT, in the header, and something passes across his face that is not quite humility, but is, perhaps, the closest thing to humility that a man of his composition can naturally produce. Julian, he says, restructure the MOU. Use the framework from page 27 as the foundation. Engage Mr. Santamensa's office as co-counsel on the traditional council negotiations. He does not take his eyes off the document, and whoever approved the Meridian assessment, without flagging the conflict of interest, I want to know who that was by end of day. Julian's face does something complicated. He nods. Marcus picks up his copy of the 31-page document. Her 31 pages. Her 2 a.m. pages, her grandmother's land case from 2003 pages, and taps it once against the table to straighten the stack. He stands. The European men stand. The room reorganizes itself around the mechanics of departure, of next steps, of the enormous logistical machinery that begins to move when people with serious money decide to do things differently than they planned. At the door, Marcus pauses. He turns back to her. Not with the evaluating look, not with the managing look, but with something that arrives more simply and with less calculation than anything she has seen from him. Your shoes, he says. She looks down. She looks back up. She says nothing because she does not know yet where this is going. And she has learned not to fill silences that are not hers to fill. He reaches into his jacket pocket and removes his card, his personal card. Not the same one he gave her at the reception, but a different one, darker, thicker, the weight of a physical promise. He sets it on the table in front of her. Aurelian has a boutique on the Rue du Marché, he says. Tell them Marcus sent you. He pauses. Though I suspect you don't need anyone to send you anywhere. He leaves. Julian follows, not looking at her. The European men follow, already speaking to each other in low, rapid German about revised timelines. Emanuela Santamensa remains seated until the room is empty except for the two of them, and then he exhales. A long, complete exhale, the exhale of a man who has been holding something for 14 months. Aquaba, he says. Well, Tui, looking at her, with the particular expression of recognition, that passes between people who come from the same part of the world and have found each other unexpectedly. In a glass building on the Rue du Rhône. She looks at the card Marcus left on the table. She picks it up. She turns it over. She sets it back down. She thinks about a shepherd in the hills outside Kumasi, who knew something a suited man from the south had counted on him, not knowing. She thinks about 37 hectares, and a colonial surveyor's incidental education, and a designation that saved a flock. She thinks about her grandmother's note in the padded envelope. In Twi, the one who witnessed is not the one who forgets. She looks down at her shoes. The worn Aurelian Oxfords, the scraped heel, the fault-line crack in the right toe, the polish her father would have recognized. They have carried her from a lobby, where a man laughed at the sight of them, to a conference room, where the same man left without the last word. For she suspects, one of the very few times in his considerable life, she picks up the card. She opens her bag. She places it next to Emanuela Santamensa's business card, which she is already intending to keep. Later that afternoon, in the Aurelian boutique on the Rue du Marché, a salesperson will bring her 3 pairs of shoes to consider: classic black Oxfords, a deep Cordovan derby, a slim-toed Chelsea boot in midnight suede. She will try them all. She will be gracious and careful and take her time. And then she will reach into her bag and place on the glass counter, not Marcus Vane's card, but a card of her own. Matte black, heavy stock, the same Aurelian house card she has carried in her wallet for 2 years, issued to loyal customers who purchase above a certain threshold, which she had done once, with the first month's paycheck from her fellowship, because she believed, even then, even broke, even 27 and uncertain, that you do not wear what you have. You wear who you are. The salesperson will look at the card. He will look at her shoes. He will look back at the card. Mrs. O.C., he will say, and the entire register of his attention will shift, subtly and completely, in the way that attention shifts when it suddenly understands it has been miscalibrating. Welcome back. She will smile. She will say thank you. She will ask to see one more pair, the Oxfords, the classic, the ones that look exactly like the ones she came in wearing, because some things don't need to change to become extraordinary. They just need to be seen. The wolves will always be out there, suited, smooth-voiced, carrying papers, counting on the shepherd not to know what the shepherd knows. But the shepherd is watching. The shepherd always was. And the ground the wolf thinks it owns has a name, and a registration number, and a grandmother who sent the file in a padded envelope, and a granddaughter who never forgot. If this story stayed with you, if you felt the moment when the words on page 47 of 63 changed everything, share it with someone who needs to remember that the most powerful thing you can carry into any room is what you already know.